prior test of these aluminum alloys found impossibly large quantities of molybdenum, suggesting that they may not have been man-made. So the question is, will this new test confirm that the metal is not of this earth?
So you guys brought us 6 pieces. And what we had to do is we had to digest those 6 pieces into a solution using acid. Of the 6, we were able to digest 3 of them completely. So one of the samples, it had 98.6% aluminum in it. We had one other sample that was 92.5% aluminum.
Now, in terms of that one element we were really looking for, the molybdenum, we were told by another lab that it contained 3.0%.
It would be really unusual, to say the least. But we did run for the moly specifically, and that was 0.006%. So again, much lower than the 3% that you were anticipating.
That's a drastic change.
Yeah.
That's a huge difference from what we were told.
And what would be a reason that you would see 3% molybdenum in a metal like that?
Perhaps the wavelengths were just misread by their analytical machine. Basically, the moly wavelength is pretty similar to a few other elements wavelengths. Perhaps that was where the error potentially occurred.
So your equipment is standardized to known elements, correct?
Correct.
So if there is an unknown element, you wouldn't even be able to pick it up.
Right, if the machine wasn't standardized to the element, we wouldn't be able to detect it.
But that leaves us with some unanswered questions about those other ones. Well, thank you guys for clarifying a lot of this for us.
It's our pleasure.
You know, I think that we should get back because I got some information from the photo analysis that we should talk about.
Okay.
So when I met with Ben today, unfortunately, we weren't able to see exactly every sentence and every word of the document, of the Ramey memo, but we did get some good information out of it.
Okay.
So there were 3 things that definitely stood out. It clearly says Fort Worth, TEX.
So they were in Fort Worth. That makes sense.
The second one was in quotation marks, and it either says DISC or DISK.
So definitively disc of some sort.
Definitely, but I think that it says something that it was in quotation marks as opposed to without quotation marks.
Yeah.
It's kind of implying we don't know exactly what we found, but this is what it best looks like. The third thing is perhaps the most telling. You can clearly see that it says the word victims. So if we go by the report issued by the Air Force in the early 90s talking about how what happened at Roswell was actually Project Mogul, that doesn't make any sense. There are no victims if you're launching balloons to spy on the Russians.
And I mean, I've spoken to so many people who claimed that there were bodies found at the crash site.
Well, the government came back and said, no, if there were bodies, it must have been crash test dummies.
Then why would they need caskets that were child-sized?
Since when do you bury crash test dummies?
Right.
Let's take a look at some of the things that we have.
Okay, so let's look at Marcel. First officer on the crash site. He knew that was not a weather balloon. So, I mean, the cover-up started immediately.
Right.
So I keep coming back to these, Jen. Flying discs, saucers. I mean, why would this headline even exist? This was by the military.
Yeah, the headline was given to them. Right.
Yeah.
You know, when we refer back to the crash site, we've got these bulldozer tracks, which doesn't make sense. You don't bring a bulldozer in if it's a weather balloon. You don't bring a bulldozer in if it's a balloon that crashed because of Project Mogul. You just go and pick up the pieces. So the fact that they had a bulldozer going through the area.
Yeah, that just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, all of this is way more questions than answers. In the years since our original investigation, new, never-revealed pieces of the Roswell puzzle have been uncovered. Hey, Ryan, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Jen. How's it going?
Good, good. So you are still working the Roswell case?
Always, and I've actually got some really fascinating leads for you. So there have been claims, Jen, that some of the debris from the Roswell crash went to Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio.
You know, Wright-Patterson has kind of been the epicenter of all these things extraterrestrial. You know, that's the rumors floating around, is that's where we store all the unidentified technology.
And I actually just spoke to a guy who has a story about Wright-Patterson that no one's ever heard before. His name is Zach Bergen. He's a physicist. He's worked for NASA, and he's worked on a ton of highly classified projects in the aerospace field.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Okay. Zach, how's it going?
Awesome. Thanks for having me on.
Hi, Zach. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your schedule today. You saw something unusual at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. When did this happen?
So this is 1982. I was fresh out of Georgia Tech, and the intelligence community usually cherry picks the people that they want, sometimes before they graduate. And I had a lot of activity at Wright-Pat, so I had occasion to have meetings on site. I was being walked to a meeting on base with an MP, and I looked over and I saw some craft I'd never seen before, and I quickly turned and said, "What was that?" And he said, "Oh, those are experimental." And so among the objects, there was probably 5 there that I noticed, and I was being ushered along. And then at one point he said, "This is where we keep the aliens, in this building over here." And then at one point, an MP said, "This is where we keep the aliens, in this building over here." And I'm like, wow, could I go over there? What would happen if I went over there? And he said I'd be shot on sight. So this was not a flippant attitude or a joke. It's very serious.
You said you saw several craft there.
I see this one saucer that looked kind of old. Then I looked at one with kind of a pointed top on legs, but then I saw these other craft like a big wing. The metal was shinier than shiny, like it was alive, but it had 3 square elongated ports along the wing. And keep in mind, I'm being ushered along, kind of like looking over my shoulder, like, oh my gosh, I want to stop and look at that. But there's no stopping and there's no discussing.
Did you believe the guard when he said that aliens were being kept there?
Yeah, there was no question. People haven't been on these bases, it's very serious. It's not really a lot of joking around. And then I got ushered along to the meeting.
Wow. Zach, you provide such a different perspective, and we really appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you very much.
Take care, Zach. There's another story about Wright-Patterson that I think corroborates Zach's story, Jen. James Clarkson worked in law enforcement for over 30 years, investigating fraud, and he spoke to a woman who worked at Wright-Patterson in 1947. Let me get him on here. James, how are you?
Hey, doing great, Ryan.
James, thank you so much for joining us. So I hear that you have an interesting story about a woman who used to work at Wright-Patterson.
I do. Her name is June Crane, and she changed my life. I give UFO lectures in public libraries. I was in Ocean Shores, Washington in 1993. A very stern, respectable-looking woman walked up to me and said, "You're right, the government knows all about UFOs and they're keeping it a secret." And I said, "Well, how do you know?" And she said, "Because I worked there." And I said, "Well, tell me more." She kind of looked at me oddly and said, "I can't, they'll come and arrest me." 4 years later, in 1997, it was a CNN news broadcast about the Air Force's brand new book called Roswell Case Closed. They were saying it was crashed top secret weather balloon mogul, so no more story. I got a call from her. She said, "It's a damn lie." She told me that she had worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio between 1942 and 1952.
So what did June claim to know?
There was a man named Master Sergeant Clarence. He comes in and he's upset and looking pale and kind of odd. And he starts talking about how he came back from New Mexico with bodies and wreckage. Everybody thinks that he's talking about somebody that they knew had died in a crash of a military aircraft. And he finally interrupts and says, "You don't understand. They weren't human." And he describes them as being bodies like children, that they had an unusual skin color. Later on that morning, a courier came to June and to every single employee with something that June called a too hot memo. Some irresponsible person has been talking about saucers and aliens. You will cease and desist immediately, or you will be subject to fine and imprisonment.
Now, given that you've probably interviewed thousands of people in your 30 years of law enforcement, what made June credible in your eyes?
I got papers that proved that she worked where she said she did.
Did June tell anyone about this when it happened, even a family member or a close friend?
I don't believe she told anyone at the time.
Was there anything else that June shared with you?
Yes, an officer came into her office, Lieutenant Rose. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a piece of metal. The officer says, "June, you're a good worker. Why don't you tear this up? Take the scissors." So she does everything she can. She can't cut it. She can't poke a hole in it. It weighs nothing. She wads it up into a ball. It returns to its original shape with no wrinkles. She looks at the guy and says, "What is this?" And he bends down and he says, "It's a piece of a spaceship." And she goes, "Really? What is it really?" And he goes, "It's a piece of a spaceship."
Could this have been the same stuff that Jesse Marcel had been in possession of as well?
We could assume it, but we can't prove it.
So at this stage in the game, do you believe that a craft from the Roswell incident did in fact end up at Wright-Patterson?
Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. I was able to verify every single concrete detail that she gave me. She was in the right place at the right time to know the things that she reported. She never embellished. She was consistent every time. She gained nothing by talking to me other than possibly clearing her conscience because she knew she was dying. And unfortunately, she passed away the following year.
James, that's quite a story. Thank you so much for your time and for sharing this with us. We appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Take care.
Wow.
This is the biggest case in UFO history, and I don't think we can deny any longer that something crashed in Roswell, and it definitely was not something of ours.
I agree that there was a crash and a probable cover-up in Roswell. And I feel like even with all the research we've done, and now with these revelations from our eyewitnesses, we've just scratched the surface. But an event this big cannot stay secret forever.